The full moon hung bright over the North Star research facility, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. Gerald Mason pushed his cleaning cart down the quiet hallway, his footsteps echoing against the polished floor. At 53 years old, Gerald had spent the last 15 years cleaning this government building in rural Minnesota. The midnight shift suited him, peaceful, predictable, and far from the bosses who worked during daylight hours. Tonight was Thursday, which meant cleaning the East Wing laboratories. Gerald hummed quietly as he worked, spraying industrial-strength cleaner on the countertops and wiping them down with practiced efficiency. His hands were rough and calloused from years of exposure to harsh chemicals. The smell of bleach and ammonia had long ago become a comfort rather than an irritation. Another night, another dollar, he muttered to himself, checking his watch. Just past midnight. 6 more hours until his shift ended. Gerald moved to the window and looked out at the empty field behind the facility. The North Star Research Facility studied unusual weather patterns and atmospheric conditions. Nothing too exciting, but it paid the bills for the small staff that worked there. Gerald was the only one inside the building at this hour, except for 2 security guards who manned the front entrance. As he turned away from the window, a flash of light caught his eye. Gerald paused and looked again. A streak of blue fire cut across the night sky, heading directly toward the open field. Meteor? He wondered aloud. But meteors fell fast. This object was slowing down. Gerald watched with growing disbelief as the light descended gently, coming to rest in the center of the field. He blinked hard, wondering if the cleaning fumes had finally gotten to him after all these years. The object was about the size of a small bus, sleek and black like polished obsidian. It reflected the moonlight in strange ways, seeming to bend the light around its edges. Gerald stood frozen at the window, his cleaning rag still clutched in his fist. An alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility, red emergency lights flashing. In the hallway, Gerald jumped at the noise, heart hammering in his chest. He fumbled for the radio clipped to his belt. "Dave? Sam? You guys okay up front?" He called into the radio, naming the 2 security guards. No response came through. Gerald tried again, a nervous edge creeping into his voice. "Guys, there's something in the field. Are you seeing this?" Still nothing. With shaking hands, Gerald set down his cleaning supplies and moved to the security monitor mounted on the wall of the lab. He tapped the screen, cycling through camera, views until he found the front desk. Both guards lay slumped over, motionless. "Oh God," Gerald whispered. He should run. He should get out of the building and drive away as fast as possible. But what if the guards needed help? Gerald moved cautiously toward the front of the building, keeping close to the wall. The alarm continued to sound, but now it seemed distant, as if his brain had decided to push the noise to the background. When he reached the lobby, he peeked around the corner. Dave and Sam were both unconscious at their posts. Their chests rose and fell with shallow breaths, alive, but completely out. The front doors of the facility remained closed and locked. 8. Movement outside caught Gerald's attention. Through the glass doors, he could see 3 tall figures crossing the parking lot toward the entrance. They moved with uncanny grace, almost floating rather than walking. Gerald ducked back behind the corner, heart racing. He peered out again, unable to stop himself from looking. Under the parking lot lights, he could see the figures clearly now. They were not human. Standing at least 7 feet tall, the beings had slender bodies with skin that shimmered pale blue in the moonlight. Their heads were slightly elongated, with large almond-shaped eyes that reflected light like a cat's. Most disturbing were their hands, long fingers that tapered to points, each fingertip glowing with an eerie purple light. One of the beings raised its hand toward the electronic lock on the front door. The lock clicked, and the doors slid open. Gerald pulled back, pressing himself against the wall, heart pounding so loudly he was sure they would hear it. Soft footsteps entered the lobby. Gerald heard a series of clicks and whistles, communication between the beings. He risked another glance. The 3 aliens stood over the unconscious guards. One of them touched a glowing finger to Sam's forehead, and the guard's body jerked once before going completely still. Gerald watched in horror as the guard's chest stopped rising. They had killed Sam with just a touch. Gerald's breath caught in his throat. He needed to move, to hide, to get away. But fear rooted him to the spot. The aliens turned from the guards and began moving down the hallway, directly toward where Gerald stood. With nowhere else to go, Gerald stepped into the open. The aliens stopped, clearly surprised to find another human. The tallest one in the center tilted its head, studying Gerald with large, reflective eyes. "Please," Gerald said, raising his hands. "I'm just the janitor." The lead alien stepped forward, its movements fluid and graceful. It raised a hand, the fingertip glowing brighter as it approached. Gerald backed away until he hit the wall. There was nowhere left to run. The alien pressed its glowing finger to Gerald's forehead. A strange warmth spread from the point of contact, followed by a tingling sensation that raced down his spine. Gerald winced, waiting for death to take him as it had taken Sam. But nothing happened. The alien pulled its hand back, staring at its fingertip with what looked like confusion. It touched Gerald again, this time pressing harder. Gerald felt the same warm tingling but remained standing. The alien stepped back, making rapid clicking sounds to its companions. All three aliens now focused intently on Gerald. The lead alien reached out and grabbed Gerald's wrist. The touch sent the same tingling sensation up his arm, but nothing more. The alien released him and began examining its own hand, as if something had gone wrong with its deadly touch. Gerald remained against the wall, too afraid to move but increasingly aware that something unusual was happening. The aliens should have killed him like they killed Sam, but for some reason their touch had no effect on him. The three aliens huddled together, communicating in their clicking language. They occasionally glanced back at Gerald, their large eyes reflecting confusion and what might have been fear. After a brief discussion, they began backing away toward the entrance. Gerald stayed perfectly still, afraid any movement might provoke them. The aliens retreated through the front doors and moved swiftly across the parking lot, disappearing into the night toward their ship in the field. When they were gone, Gerald collapsed to his knees, his whole body shaking. He crawled over to Dave, who was still breathing unlike Sam. Gerald grabbed the security desk phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. "Emergency services," answered the operator. "Send help to North Star Research Facility," Gerald gasped. "There's been an attack. One man is dead and—" He hesitated, knowing how crazy he was about to sound. "Aliens. 3 of them. They killed Sam with just a touch." "Sir, are you injured?" the operator asked, concern in her voice. "No," Gerald said, sudden realization washing over him. "That's the thing. They touched me too, but nothing happened. Their touch didn't work on me." By sunrise, the facility was swarming with military personnel and government scientists. Gerald had been questioned for hours, repeating his story again and again. Dave had regained consciousness but remembered nothing. Sam's body was taken away in a black bag. Dr. Elaine Winters arrived by helicopter just after dawn. She had flown in directly from Washington, her expertise in unusual biological phenomena making her the government's top choice to lead the investigation. "Mr. Mason," she said, shaking Gerald's hand, "I understand you had direct contact with the beings and survived." Gerald nodded wearily. "They touched me the same way they touched Sam, but nothing happened." Dr. Winters studied him with keen interest. "And you've worked as a janitor here for how long?" 15 years, Gerald replied. "Exposure to industrial cleaning chemicals daily," Dr. Winters murmured, making notes on her tablet. "We need to run some tests on your blood, Mr. Mason. You may have just become the most important man on the planet." Outside, military vehicles surrounded the alien craft, which remained motionless in the field. No one approached it, orders from the highest levels keeping everyone at a safe distance. Gerald looked out the window at the ship that had brought death and change to his quiet life. He didn't feel important. He felt scared and confused. But as Dr. Winters prepared to draw his blood, a thought occurred to him that was both terrifying and strangely comforting. For whatever reason, The alien's deadly touch had failed on a human. On him, and that failure clearly frightened them. Perhaps humanity wasn't as defenseless as they appeared to be. 3 days after the encounter at North Star Research Facility, Gerald sat in a sterile room at a secret government base somewhere in Wyoming. He had been flown here by military helicopter the morning after the aliens appeared. The walls were plain white, the furniture simple and bolted to the floor. A one-way mirror covered most of one wall, and Gerald knew people were watching him from the other side. Dr. Elaine Winters entered the room carrying a tablet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she looked like she hadn't slept much. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Mason?" she asked, taking a seat across from him. "Same as yesterday," Gerald replied. "Like a lab rat. Any news from outside?" Dr. Winters frowned. "I'm afraid so. More ships have landed, not just in America, all over the world." Gerald's stomach tightened. "Like the one I saw?" "Exactly like it. London, Beijing, Moscow, Sydney, Rio de Janeiro, dozens of major cities." She tapped her tablet and turned it to show Gerald news footage. A sleek black ship hovered over the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Another landed in Central Park in New York City. "Are they killing people?" Gerald asked quietly. Dr. Winters nodded grimly. "Anyone who gets close. One touch, and the victim's nervous system shuts down completely. The death toll is over 5,000 worldwide and climbing." Gerald rubbed his forehead where the alien had touched him. He still didn't understand why he had survived. "But we have good news too," Dr. Winters continued, her expression brightening slightly. "You're not the only one, Gerald." "Not the only what?" "Not the only one immune to their touch." She showed him pictures of 3 people on her tablet. Penny Rodriguez, a chemical plant worker from Houston. Owen Kelly, a pesticide sprayer from Sacramento. Victor Hughes, an embalmer from Miami. All approached by the aliens, all touched, all still alive. Gerald studied the faces. "What do we have in common?" "That's what we're trying to figure out. But our working theory involves chemical exposure." Dr. Winters adjusted her glasses. "Your blood tests show high levels of certain compounds found in industrial cleaning products. We believe years of exposure changed your body chemistry enough to neutralize the alien toxin." Before Gerald could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Dr. Winters jumped to her feet. "What's happening?" Gerald asked. "They've found us," she whispered, her face pale. The door burst open and a soldier in full combat gear rushed in. "Dr. Winters, we need to evacuate immediately. They've landed less than a mile from the base." "How did they find us?" Dr. Winters demanded, as they hurried down the corridor. "Unknown, ma'am, but they're heading straight for us." Gerald followed them through a maze of hallways until they reached a large laboratory. Inside, scientists were frantically packing equipment and samples into cases. On screens around the room, security camera footage showed 3 alien ships descending toward the facility. "They're after him," Dr. Winters said suddenly, pointing at Gerald. "They must have realized he's immune. They're tracking him somehow." "Me?" Gerald's voice cracked. "How would they even know who I am?" A deep boom shook the building, making dust fall from the ceiling. "That was the perimeter defense," the soldier explained. "It won't hold them for long." Dr. Winters grabbed a small case and took Gerald's arm. "We need to get you out of here. Your blood samples, too. You're too valuable to lose." They rushed toward a helicopter pad at the rear of the facility. 2 Black Hawk helicopters waited with rotors already spinning. Soldiers helped Gerald and Dr. Winters into the first helicopter while scientists loaded equipment into the second. As they lifted off, Gerald looked down and saw the aliens approaching the base. There were more of them now, at least 20 moving with that same eerie grace. Soldiers fired at them, but the aliens seemed to shimmer and shift, making themselves hard to hit. Whenever an alien reached a soldier, one touch was all it took. Bodies fell like dominoes. "Where are we going?" Gerald shouted over the roar of the helicopter. "Cheyenne Mountain Complex," Dr. Winters replied. "Underground facility, more secure." Gerald watched as the base grew smaller behind them. The second helicopter followed close behind. But then a flash of blue light shot up from the ground, hitting the second helicopter's tail. It spun wildly before crashing into the trees below. No, Dr. Winters cried, watching helplessly as flames rose from the crash site. The pilot pushed the helicopter to full speed, flying low over the trees to avoid detection. Gerald's heart pounded in his chest. Everything was happening too fast. Just 4 days ago, he had been cleaning floors. Now he was running for his life from alien invaders. Why is this happening? He asked, more to himself than to Dr. Winters. She looked at him with tired eyes. I don't know. But your immunity scares them. That much is clear. 6 hours later, deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, Gerald watched news reports from around the world. The aliens were systematically attacking power plants, water treatment facilities, and communication centers. Cities went dark one by one. Cell phone networks crashed. The internet became spotty and unreliable. In a high-security lab deeper in the mountain, Dr. Winters and her team worked around the clock. They had set up a makeshift laboratory and were analyzing blood samples from Gerald and the other known survivors. The president is going to address the nation, announced General Harris, the facility's commander, as he entered the room. Everyone gathered around the television. The president looked tired but determined as he spoke from an undisclosed location. My fellow Americans, we face the greatest threat in human history. These alien visitors have made their intentions clear through their actions. They seek to disable our infrastructure and eliminate our population. But we have discovered something they didn't expect. Some of us are immune to their deadly touch. The president explained about the survivors and the ongoing research to understand their immunity. He urged people to remain calm and follow evacuation orders. We're working to create a protective measure based on these immune individuals. Until then, avoid all contact with the alien beings. After the broadcast, Gerald found Dr. Winters alone in the lab, staring at blood samples under a microscope. Any progress? He asked quietly. She looked up, dark circles under her eyes. Yes, actually. We've isolated the compound in your blood that neutralizes their toxin. It's a unique chemical bond that formed after years of exposure to certain cleaning agents. The same pattern appears in the other survivors, different chemicals but similar effects. Can you recreate it? Make others immune? We're trying. But it took years for these changes to happen in your body. We need to find a way to speed up the process. She rubbed her tired eyes. So far, we've created a spray that provides temporary immunity in lab tests. About 4 hours of protection before it breaks down. Gerald nodded slowly. That's something at least. It's not enough, Dr. Winters said, frustration in her voice. We need more time. But time was running out. Reports came in every hour of more cities falling under alien control. The death toll climbed into the tens of thousands. That night, Gerald couldn't sleep. He paced his small room, thinking about everything that had happened. His mind kept returning to the moment when the alien had touched him, the look of surprise in those strange eyes, the fear. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Winters stood there, looking even more exhausted than before. Sorry to bother you, she said. But I had an idea. Would you come to the lab? Gerald followed her through the quiet corridors. In the lab, she showed him a complex molecular model on her computer screen. This is the compound in your blood, she explained. And this is the alien toxin, based on samples we collected from victims. When they meet, the toxin breaks down before it can affect your nervous system. Okay, Gerald said slowly. How does that help us? What if we could concentrate this compound? Make it stronger? Your body produces it naturally now, but at low levels. If we could boost production, her voice trailed off as she typed rapidly on her keyboard. You think you can use me to create a better defense? Dr. Winters looked up, a small spark of hope in her tired eyes. I think you might be more than just immune, Gerald. You might be the key to fighting back. For the first time since the aliens arrived, Gerald felt something other than fear. He felt purpose. Maybe his years of scrubbing floors with harsh chemicals hadn't been meaningless after all. Maybe they had prepared him for this moment. Whatever you need from me, he said firmly. I'm ready. Outside the mountain fortress, the world continued to change. But inside, a janitor and a scientist worked together, searching for humanity's best hope against an enemy that had never known defeat until they met Gerald Mason. 6 weeks had passed since the aliens first landed at North Star Research Facility. The world had changed completely in that time. Major cities were under alien control. Millions had died from the deadly touch. Those who survived lived in fear, hiding in rural areas or underground shelters. But humans were fighting back. Inside the Cheyenne Mountain complex, Gerald sat perfectly still as a nurse injected him with a clear fluid. Dr. Winters watched closely, clipboard in hand. This was the 12th experimental treatment they had tried on Gerald in the past month. "How do you feel?" Dr. Winters asked after the nurse removed the needle. "Fine," Gerald replied. "Same as the other times." Dr. Winters nodded and made notes. "Your body is producing more of the protective compound now. The treatments are working." Gerald rubbed his arm where the needle had gone in. His veins had a faint blue tint to them now, a side effect of the treatments that boosted his natural immunity. The compound in his blood that neutralized the alien toxin was now concentrated enough to be harvested and replicated. "Is it enough?" Gerald asked. "For the spray?" Dr. Winters smiled for the first time in weeks. "Yes, the new formula works. It provides immunity for 4 hours with minimal side effects. We've already sent it to manufacturing facilities around the country." This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Scientists had developed a spray that could be applied to the skin, creating a temporary barrier against the alien toxin. It wasn't perfect. It caused mild skin irritation and needed to be reapplied every 4 hours, but it allowed humans to fight back. The first military units equipped with the spray are preparing to engage the aliens in Denver, Dr. Winters continued. "If they succeed, we'll expand operations worldwide." Gerald nodded, feeling a mix of hope and worry. He had become close to Dr. Winters during their weeks working together. Their professional relationship had gradually become more personal as they worked side by side day and night. He caught her looking at him with concern. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "General Harris wants to meet with us. He has a new mission in mind." An hour later, Gerald and Dr. Winters sat across from General Harris in the facility's command center. Maps and screens covered the walls, showing alien positions around the globe. "The spray is a good start," General Harris said, "but we need more. We need to understand why they're here and how to drive them away permanently." He pointed to a large screen showing Lake Michigan. A massive alien ship hovered above the water, much larger than the smaller craft that had landed in cities. "We believe this is their command ship. All communications from the smaller ships lead back to this one." Dr. Winters leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, General?" "We need someone to infiltrate that ship, someone who can get close to them, someone they've shown interest in before." The general turned his gaze to Gerald. Gerald felt his mouth go dry. "Me? You want me to go into their ship?" "Your immunity is natural and permanent," General Harris explained. "The spray works, but it's temporary. You're the only human who can safely maintain prolonged contact with them." Dr. Winters stood up, her face flushed with anger. "This is insane. He's not a soldier. He's a janitor." "He's also our best chance," the general replied calmly. "The aliens have shown specific interest in him. They tracked him to our Wyoming facility. They might bring him directly to their leaders." Gerald listened as they argued about him as if he wasn't there. His mind raced with fear, but another feeling grew alongside it. Determination. For weeks, he had been a passive participant, a blood donor, a test subject. Maybe it was time to do something more. "I'll do it," he said quietly. Both Dr. Winters and General Harris stopped arguing and looked at him. "Gerald, no," Dr. Winters said. "This isn't your fight anymore. You've already given us the key to survival." "That's exactly why it is my fight," he countered. "I'm the best chance we have at getting close enough to communicate with them or learn their weaknesses." The plan was risky but simple. Gerald would allow himself to be captured in a location known to have alien activity. A tracking device implanted under his skin would guide a strike team. led by Captain Frank Delgado, to follow once he was inside the ship. Gerald's mission was to gather information and, if possible, find a way to communicate. 2 days later, Gerald stood alone in an abandoned parking lot in Chicago, just 3 miles from the edge of Lake Michigan where the command ship hovered. Dr. Winters had argued against the mission until the very end, but finally accepted she couldn't change Gerald's mind. "Just be careful," she had said before he left, her voice breaking slightly. "We need you to come back." The way she looked at him made it clear that "we" meant something more personal. Gerald took a deep breath of the cool morning air. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, looking like any survivor might. The tracking device under his skin was undetectable except by the specialized equipment the strike team carried. He had no weapons. They would only be taken away if he was captured. He didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, a patrol of 3 aliens glided into the parking lot. They moved with that same unsettling grace Gerald remembered from their first encounter. Their skin glowed faintly blue in the morning light, and their long fingers ended in those deadly glowing points. Gerald stood his ground as they approached, fighting every instinct to run. The aliens recognized him immediately. Their large eyes widened and they made those clicking sounds to each other, their language. One reached out and touched Gerald's face with a glowing finger. Nothing happened, just as before. The alien pulled back, studying its fingertip with what looked like confusion. Then all 3 aliens grabbed Gerald by the arms and began leading him toward the lake. Gerald didn't resist. This was the plan. As they walked, he noticed something odd. The aliens weren't trying to kill him anymore. They seemed to be protecting him, keeping him between them as they moved quickly through the empty streets. When they reached the shore of Lake Michigan, a small craft descended from the massive ship above. The aliens guided Gerald inside. The interior was smooth and dark, with strange symbols glowing on the walls. The craft rose silently into the air. Through a clear panel, Gerald watched Chicago shrink beneath them as they approached the enormous command ship. It was at least a mile wide, a perfect disk of the same black material as the smaller ships. As they drew closer, an opening appeared in its side, and the small craft slipped inside. Gerald was led through curved corridors, past rooms filled with equipment he couldn't begin to understand. Other aliens stopped to stare at him as he passed. He hoped the strike team was tracking him successfully. Finally, they entered a large chamber in what Gerald guessed was the center of the ship. A single alien waited there, taller and more luminescent than the others. The strike team would later nickname this being the Radiant. Gerald stood before this leader, trying to appear calm despite his racing heart. To his shock, the Radiant spoke to him in halting, synthesized English. "Why, you not die?" The words were stilted and mechanical, clearly produced by some kind of translation device. Gerald hadn't expected communication to be possible so soon. He chose his words carefully. "I don't know exactly. Something in my body protects me from your touch." The Radiant tilted its elongated head, studying Gerald with large reflective eyes. "Others? Like you?" Gerald hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "A few," he admitted. "Not many." The Radiant moved closer, its movements fluid like water. "Show." "So how? Why do you want to know?" Gerald asked. "So you can overcome our protection, so you can kill all of us." The Radiant made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Not kill. Save." Before Gerald could ask what that meant, a commotion erupted in the corridor outside. The strike team had arrived sooner than planned. Captain Delgado and his soldiers burst into the chamber, weapons raised, their skin protected by the immunity spray. "Step away from the human," Delgado shouted. The Radiant didn't move. Instead, it turned to Gerald with what appeared to be disappointment in its strange eyes. "Not understanding," it said. "Not enemy." Gerald realized with sudden clarity that there had been a terrible misunderstanding. The aliens hadn't come to invade. There was something else happening here, something he didn't yet understand. He raised his hands toward both sides. "Wait!" he shouted. Everyone just wait. We need to talk. Captain Delgado looked confused but held his fire. The Radiant remained perfectly still. In that tense moment of standoff, Gerald understood that his role had changed. He was no longer just a test subject or even a spy. He had become a bridge between two species who had started with death, but might find a way to something else, if he could keep them from destroying each other in the next few minutes. "Lower your weapons," Gerald said to Captain Delgado and his team. "I don't think they want to hurt us." Captain Delgado frowned, but signaled his soldiers to lower their guns. They remained tense, ready to raise them again at the first sign of danger. "What do you mean they don't want to hurt us?" Delgado asked, his eyes never leaving the Radiant. "They've killed millions with their touch." Gerald turned to the alien leader. "Can you explain? Why have you been killing humans?" The Radiant's large eyes reflected the light strangely as it processed the question. Its command of English was improving with each exchange. "Not intention to kill. Touch is greeting for us. Did not know. Deadly to humans." The synthetic voice paused. "When you not die. We needed to understand." Gerald tried to make sense of this. "You're saying all of this was a mistake? You didn't mean to kill people with your touch?" "Our touch. Harmless to our kind," the Radiant explained. "Never found. Species affected before." Captain Delgado stepped forward. "That's hard to believe. Why keep touching humans after you saw what happened?" The Radiant moved toward a wall panel. The soldiers raised their weapons again, but the alien simply pressed its long fingers to the panel. A screen appeared, showing images of the alien homeworld, our world. "Dying," the Radiant said. "Disease attacks our neural paths. We sought samples from other worlds. Your buildings, technology, suggested primitive species, easy to collect samples. But you," it gestured to Gerald, "you changed everything. You survived our touch." Gerald watched the screen as it showed images of the alien world. It looked beautiful but sick. Plants were withering, and many aliens lay motionless. "So you came to Earth to find a cure for your disease?" Gerald asked. "Yes, did not expect resistance, did not expect immunity." Captain Delgado shook his head. "If you just wanted samples, why attack our infrastructure? Our power plants, communication centers?" "To prevent panic, to collect samples quickly, then leave." The Radiant's voice became more fluid as the translation technology adapted. "When we found immunity, plans changed. Needed to understand how humans resist our touch." Gerald thought about his years cleaning with harsh chemicals, how his body had adapted to tolerate them. An idea began to form in his mind. "Our touch is death to you," the Radiant continued, "but yours is not to us. Our scientists believe connection between your immunity and cure for our disease." Before Gerald could respond, his radio crackled to life. Dr. Winter's voice came through, tense and worried. "Gerald? Captain Delgado? Are you there? What's happening?" Gerald picked up the radio. "We're fine, Elaine. We're talking with them." "Talking?" Her voice rose in surprise. "They can communicate?" "Yes, and I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. They didn't come here to invade. They're looking for a cure for a disease that's killing their people." There was silence on the radio for a moment. Then Dr. Winters spoke again, her scientific mind clearly racing. "Ask them about their disease. What are the symptoms? How does it progress?" Gerald relayed the questions to the Radiant. The alien described a disease that attacked their neural pathways, causing paralysis and eventually death. It had begun 5 years ago and had already killed nearly a third of their population. Dr. Winters gasped audibly over the radio. "Gerald, that sounds similar to how their touch affects us. Their natural biology might be toxic to our nervous systems, while something in your modified biology provides resistance." The Radiant seemed to understand. "Yes, the compound in your blood. Similar to substance we need. We have been studying it since finding you." Gerald turned to Captain Delgado. "We need to bring Dr. Winters here. She needs to see their research, and they need to see ours." "Captain?" Delgado hesitated. years of military training making him cautious. But looking at the aliens, really looking at them, he could see they were suffering. Their luminescent skin had a dull quality to it, and they moved with careful, pained motions. "I'll arrange it," he finally said. "But we maintain security protocols." 3 hours later, Dr. Winters stood in the alien laboratory examining their equipment with wonder. The aliens had invited a small team of human scientists aboard their ship, providing them with protective suits to prevent accidental contact. "Their technology is incredible," Dr. Winters said to Gerald as they watched alien scientists work. "They've already isolated the compound in your blood and are testing variations of it." "Can it help them?" Gerald asked. Dr. Winters nodded slowly. "I think so, and they might be able to help us too. Their understanding of neural pathways is far beyond ours. This could lead to treatments for conditions like Parkinson's, ALS, even Alzheimer's." Over the following days, an unlikely partnership formed. Human and alien scientists worked side by side, sharing knowledge and samples. The protective spray developed from Gerald's blood was modified to work with alien physiology, creating a potential treatment for their disease. "It's ironic," Dr. Winters said one evening as she and Gerald looked out at Earth from a viewport on the alien ship. "What we thought was a weapon, their touch, was just a biological incompatibility. And the thing that saved you, years of exposure to industrial chemicals that most would consider harmful, might save their entire species." Gerald nodded, watching the lights of cities below. Some areas were still dark from the infrastructure damage, but many were coming back online as humans and aliens worked together on repairs. "I never thought cleaning toilets would lead to this," he said with a small smile. Dr. Winters took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. His skin had a permanent bluish tint now from the treatments, but she didn't seem to mind. "The most ordinary lives can hide extraordinary possibilities," she said softly. 1 year later, Gerald stood on a stage beside Dr. Winters and the Radiant at the opening ceremony of the first joint human-alien research facility in Minnesota, built near the original North Star research facility where it all began. The world had changed dramatically. The aliens had shared their technology in exchange for the medical breakthrough based on Gerald's unique biology. Earth now had cleaner energy, advanced medical treatments, and the beginnings of faster-than-light travel technology. The aliens had received a cure for their plague, developed from the compound in Gerald's blood. Their dying world was healing, and a new era of cooperation between species had begun. Gerald looked out at the crowd of humans and aliens gathered for the ceremony. A year ago, he had been just a janitor working the night shift. Now he was considered a hero, the man whose immunity had prevented a war and saved 2 species. The Radiant stepped forward to address the crowd, its English now perfectly fluent thanks to improved translation technology. "1 year ago we came to Earth seeking salvation but bringing only death. We did not understand your biology, and you did not understand our intentions. But one human showed us that differences can become strengths. Gerald Mason's unique biology changed, by years of exposure to what many would consider harmful, became the bridge between our worlds." The alien leader turned to Gerald. "We have a saying on our world, from the most unlikely soil grows the strongest tree. You have proven this wisdom true." Gerald nodded, feeling strangely calm despite the hundreds of eyes watching him. When it was his turn to speak, he kept his message simple. "I was just doing my job, cleaning floors with whatever worked best. I never imagined those chemicals would change me, or that those changes would matter so much. But that's the thing about life. Sometimes the things we take for granted become our greatest strengths." He reached out and shook the Radiant's hand, no longer fearing its touch. The alien's skin felt cool and slightly electric against his palm, but there was no harm in it anymore, only connection. As Gerald looked out at the future he had helped create, he remembered that night at North Star facility when he first saw the alien ship land. Fear had been his first reaction then. Now standing between 2 worlds as a bridge rather than a barrier, he felt something very different: hope. Sometimes the most extraordinary changes began with the simplest things, like a janitor whose Ordinary life had prepared him for an extraordinary moment, when an alien's deadly touch failed on a human, and,